naked, crucified man and is believed by millions of Christians to be the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. The image on the shroud invited all to contemplate the nature of human suffering and God's love for humanity. Carbon dating of the Shroud of Turin. In 1988, an international team of scientific experts performed radiocarbon dating on snippets of the Shroud of Turin. The results showed that the famous cloth did not date back to the time of Christ's crucifixion in the 1st century AD. In fact, the cloth seemed to have been manufactured sometime between 1260 and 1390 AD. The team concluded the shroud was nothing more than a medieval hoax. In the years since the stunning announcement, shroud experts and other investigators have called into question the accuracy of the dating. Some have even argued that damage to the border of the shroud in December 1532 during a fire in the chapel of the Dukes of Savoy in Chambéry, France, might in some way have changed the chemical composition of the cloth and skewed the testing results. Stephen J. Mattingly, a professor of microbiology and immunology at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center in San Antonio, also doubts the 1988 radiocarbon results, though he blames not fire, but microbes. Despite the lingering controversy, the basic science behind radiocarbon dating is disarmingly straightforward. The element carbon exists naturally on Earth in 2 stable forms, or isotopes, known as carbon-12 and carbon-13. In carbon-13, the nucleus of the atom contains 1 extra subatomic particle called a neutron. A third isotope of carbon with 2 extra neutrons, known as carbon-14, is produced in the atmosphere when atoms of nitrogen are blasted by high-energy cosmic rays streaming in from space. The atom is unstable, radioactive, and eventually decays back into nitrogen-14. Because some of the radioactive atom always exists at a low level in the atmosphere and on Earth. However, it gets incorporated at a predictable rate into the cells and tissues of all living things, from bacteria to plants to people. When, for example, the organisms suck up C14, containing carbon dioxide molecules as part of their natural metabolic processes. After things die, they no longer take in C14, and so as the isotope decays back to nitrogen-14, its relative abundance steadily decreases over time. Measuring the amount of C14 in something originally derived from organic material, then a wooden artifact, say, or the fibers of a linen cloth, which are made from flax plants, tells the amount of time that has passed since the organism it came from was last alive. What that means, however, is that any contamination with an object that was more recently alive will raise the relative abundance of C14 atoms, producing an apparently younger age. In the case of the Shroud of Turin, the younger contaminants were bacteria. You might imagine that over hundreds of years or several thousand, the shroud has come in contact with many thousands of species of bacteria and fungi, and some were able to grow for short or long periods of time. Some of these organisms would be more recent and be incorporating more recent radiocarbon material. The microbes are not digesting the linen, they are eating one another, so to speak. As long as they can grow and incorporate carbon dioxide, which many microbes can do, they are actually making the shroud appear more recent as time continues. In fact, scientists have found several different species of bacteria colonizing pieces of the shroud, including some organisms that had never been seen before. They tested samples from an outside strip of the cloth removed during the 1988 dating effort. The scientific caretaker of the shroud at the time kept the strip and later provided samples to scientists. One said, "The Catholic Church did not sanction the removal and giving of the material to us and would not certify that the pieces were authentic. Nevertheless, we know that they are authentic." Intriguingly, one of the microbe species seems to be producing an unusual material that coats the linen threads with a brittle plastic-like material that made the linen difficult to cut, much like trying to cut through dry pasta. It appears that this polymer may have actually helped preserve the shroud linen through time. Similar coatings on other artifacts, The linen wrappings on mummies, for example, could also be affecting their radiocarbonages. Some also suspect that bacteria are responsible for the shroud's ethereal image. The idea is that as the crucified man was dying, bacteria such as the common skin microbe Staphylococcus epidermi would have colonized and multiplied in his bloody wounds, creating a thin layer called a biofilm. A biofilm can soak up water like a sponge. After the man died and his body was washed, the biofilm would have absorbed water and become extremely sticky. When the burial shroud was later placed over the body, it would have adhered fast, allowing the transfer of the microbes to the fibers of the cloth. Over time, the degradation of the microbes would have produced a faint yellow imprint of the face and body that slowly darkened. They have observed the drying of bacteria on surfaces before, and noticed that they leave a straw yellow color similar to that observed with the Turin shroud. Key to the color change are unsaturated fatty acids, normally found within the membranes of all types of cells, including bacteria. The addition of oxygen atoms to the fatty acids molecules, or oxidation, changes their chemical makeup, giving rise to the yellow color. Similarly, the yellowing seen in Ring Around the Collar is due to fatty acids from the body and bacteria that have rubbed off onto the collar. Bloodstains on the Shroud of Turin. Another startling piece of evidence comes in the form of the bloodstains on the shroud. In fact, the bloodstains have been shown to have originated before the image was even present on the cloth. All the wounds are vertically juxtaposed, showing that whoever is on the cloth suffered a death by crucifixion. Additionally, the bloodstains show severe stress, which demonstrates that an artist did not create the shroud, but actually contains blood, genuine hemoglobin, with an AB+ type. The wounds that are found on the shroud show head wounds from the crown of thorns, wounds on the side from a Roman pilum, and wounds on the wrists, feet, and ankles from the nails. The likelihood of all of the 124 blood stains being identical is close to impossible, yet they are. The Shroud of Turin is a precise photographic negative taken on a photographically sensitive cloth, in a time when photographs did not exist. The image has been proven not to have been produced by paint, dye, vapors, or scorching, implying that it was not created by an artist. The image of the Shroud of Turin is restricted to the uppermost parts of the fibrils in the cloth and does not penetrate into the medulla of the fiber. There is no other image that has done this. The blood imprints on the shroud preceded the formation of the actual image. 3D imaging of the shroud shows bones inside the hand and flesh surrounding the bone. In fact, by supplying a myriad of evidence, scientists shows that the Shroud of Turin originated around the year AD 29 in Judea. It is a perfect photographic negative of a man who underwent a unique crucifixion, and there is no other image like it. Although many will still deny the spiritual implications of the shroud, the evidence is becoming increasingly hard to deny. Other evidence. Those same pathologists detected swelling around the eyes, the natural reaction to bruising from a beating. The New Testament claims Jesus was severely beaten before his crucifixion. Rigor mortis is also evident with the enlarged chest and distended feet, classic marks of an actual crucifixion, which means the man in that burial linen was mutilated in exactly the same manner that the New Testament says Jesus of Nazareth was beaten, whipped, and executed by means of crucifixion. One of the more fascinating aspects of the shroud is that it is a negative image, not a positive one. That technology was not even understood until the 19th century, with the invention of the camera, when photography became a modern reality, which blows holes in the oft-purported theory that the shroud is merely a medieval forgery that was stained or painted. It would be 1,000 years until such ideas as negative images were understood, which no medieval artist could have painted. The positive image taken from the negative one left on the shroud shows in detail many of the historic markers that connect to the gospel accounts of Jesus' death. You have the scourging marks from a Roman flagrum on the arms, legs, and back, lacerations around the head from the crown of thorns. His shoulder appears to be dislocated, probably from carrying his crossbeam and falling. According to scientists who examined the shroud, all of these wounds were inflicted while he was alive. Then, of course, there is the stab wound in the chest and the nail marks in the wrists and feet, all consistent with the eyewitness accounts recorded in the Gospels. The image of the man, with all of his facial features and hair and wounds, is absolutely unique. Nothing like it in all the world. Totally inexplicable. And given there are no stains indicating decomposition on the linen itself, we know that whatever body was in the shroud left before the decomposition process began, just as the Gospel writers testify about Jesus' resurrection from the dead on the third day. The man was interred according to Jewish burial customs at the time, being laid in a sail-like linen shroud in the manner they required. Yet, he did not receive the ritual washing. As the New Testament indicates, Jesus didn't, because of the Passover and Sabbath requirements for burying the dead. Then there is the cloth itself, which is entirely unique. Nowhere has any other cloth been found to have depicted the image of a dead man on its surface. Again, in the history of archaeology and the study of historical artifacts, nowhere have we come across a burial linen with a body imprint. The imprinted cloth is old. The linen itself has existed for over 600 years as the so-called Shroud of Turin, and nearly 2,000 years as the image of Edessa, named after a small town outside of ancient Antioch in modern Syria. While carbon dating in the 80s placed the shroud's age in the Middle Ages, around AD 1300, new evidence has roundly discredited both the results and method of that dating. Newer evidence places the date comfortably within the time frame that Jesus was said to have been crucified and buried in AD 33. The linen used of this cloth is a herringbone twill most likely manufactured and distributed throughout the Mediterranean world at least 2,000 years ago. This is crucial because it discredits the notion that the shroud was a medieval forgery concocted by some confidence artist. Clues on the Shroud of Turin revealed shocking truth. Clues on the Shroud of Turin tell us what Christ endured on Good Friday. Or we can say, the cloth gives the faithful a clear look at the way Jesus died for us. Perhaps no religious icon is as hotly debated as the Shroud of Turin. Believed by some to be a miraculous imprint of the body of Jesus Christ on his burial cloth just after his crucifixion, the shroud is condemned by others as a religious hoax, painted by skillful artists in the 14th century. Though the Shroud of Turin is not officially recognized as a relic by the Catholic Church, it nonetheless inspires veneration by the faithful worldwide. The faint yellow image on the Shroud of Turin shows the front and back of the body of a man who died by crucifixion. But no one knows for certain how the image actually arrived on the linen. The image is a near-perfect negative and is anatomically detailed far beyond the skill of any artist before the late Middle Ages. With the exception of the 1988 radiocarbon dating tests, most scientific research indicates that the imprint could indeed be the image of Jesus Christ. If we do accept that the shroud bears this miraculous imprint, this image can tell us a great deal about Christ's suffering and death. Based on the shroud, Jesus of Nazareth was a physically commanding person, standing nearly 6 feet tall and weighing 175 to 180 pounds, a large man for that time in history. He had very broad shoulders and well-defined muscular arms and legs. He had a majestic face and thick, well-groomed hair. Ethnologists have found the features of the man, long hair, beard, unbraided pigtail, to be consistent with those of a Sephardic Jew living in Roman-occupied territory. His age at death is estimated to be between 30 and 45 years old. What the shroud tells us of Christ's death is that he endured the worst form of torture of which evil minds could conceive. His death was extremely brutal. His right eye is swollen almost shut. His nose is deviated. Both eyebrows are swollen, and there are several other lacerations on his cheeks, all as a result of a severe beating. His chest, shoulders, back, buttocks, and legs are covered with dumbbell-shaped cuts or scourge marks. A Roman scourge consisted of a leather thong with a pair of lead balls or round bones at the end. The scourging was meant to be painful, but not fatal. The balls ripped out bits of flesh, causing deep contusions and substantial blood loss. The configuration of the scourge marks, 120 in all, indicate that he was whipped by two men while bound naked to a post with his hands tied over his head. Contrary to popular belief, those condemned to die did not carry the entire cross to their crucifixion. The upright part of the cross, or the stipes, was a permanent fixture outside the city gates. The condemned were forced to carry the crossbeam, or patibulum, estimated to have weighed 75 to 125 pounds, balanced along the back of their shoulders and strapped to their outstretched arms. The image of the man's back shows two large friction marks, one just above the right shoulder, one further down the left side, caused by the heavy friction of the beam across his back. His knees show severe swelling and scraping caused by repeated falls while carrying the crossbeam. The scourging had weakened Jesus so much that Simon of Cyrene was eventually compelled to carry the cross for him. The blood flows coming from his scalp indicate that the crown of thorns was not the dainty halo so often portrayed in religious art. It was, in fact, more of a cap, covering his entire scalp and beaten into his head with a reed. The shroud indicates that his right leg lay against the vertical beam, the left foot slanted inward and placed over the right. A single spike, approximately 11 inches long, was driven at a diagonal through the heels of both feet in order to support the weight of the body. A large blood stain near the feet has been shown to be a post-mortem flow, occurring when the spike was removed. Crucifixion victims were not nailed through the palms where the flesh would have quickly torn. Instead, the spikes were driven through the folds of the wrist. By displacing the two bone structures, the nails could then support the weight of the upper body. His thumbs aren't visible on the shroud because the nail also severed the median nerve, resulting in the thumb immediately folding, painfully paralyzed, into the palms of his hands. A body on a cross assumed two positions. In the relaxed position, the weight is supported by the wrists, the legs bent, and the upper body slumped forward. This caused the shoulder blades to close in, making exhalation difficult. In order to resume breathing, the victim would force himself up, shifting his weight to the nails driven through his heels and causing the bones in his wrists to rotate around the spikes. The searing pain of this position would make it nearly impossible to maintain. The flow of blood on his forearms, as evident in the shroud, moves in a jagged path toward his shoulders, indicating that he struggled mightily against death, raising himself up on his feet many times to keep breathing. Romans often practiced crurifragium on crucifixion victims, breaking their lower legs, thereby hastening their deaths by preventing them from pushing their bodies up to breathe. According to the Gospel of John, the Jews wanted to prepare for the Sabbath, so they asked permission of Pilate to break the legs of the crucified. Jesus' legs were not broken since he was already dead when they arrived. Jesus died of asphyxiation, and in death, his pectoral muscles are contracted, the pit of the stomach is sunk inward, and the lower abdomen is pressed forward. Another distinctive feature of the shroud is the large blood stain on the side of the chest. According to the Gospel of John, when the soldiers came to break his legs, one of the soldiers thrust a lance into his side, and immediately blood and water flowed out. There are different theories for the water that emanated from his body, but most pathologists agree that the fluid emanated from a post-mortem piercing of the heart through the 5th and 6th rib. The clear fluid can be clearly seen on the shroud in X-ray photographs. After Jesus died, the wealthy Joseph of Arimathea retrieved the body. He took it down, wrapped it in fine linen, and laid it in a tomb. The makeup of the fabric, a herringbone twill weave, was a costly manufacture for the time. The scriptures do not mention the preservation of any burial cloth, perhaps because there was not time for proper burial. The Sabbath was quickly approaching, and, as observant Jews, the disciples were possibly distressed by the fact that his body could not be properly cleaned and anointed with oils and spices before it was entombed. Perhaps the biggest mystery of the shroud is what happened to the body inside of it. There are no signs of physical decomposition of Jesus' body in the image. The image then exists as a sort of snapshot of a corpse that was removed within 72 hours of burial. This, along with many other factors, indicates it was the shroud of Jesus Christ. The unbroken legs, the crown of thorns, the side wound, and the heavy scourging are historically uncommon. Still, our faith in the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ does not depend on the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. Instead, the shroud gives us a clear look at the way Jesus died for us. A torturous, evil method, full of unspeakable pain and suffering. It cannot but humble us. The greatest message of the Shroud of Turin. As physical evidence of that restoration, the shroud presents a mirror of the gospel, which is sacrificial love beyond all fathoming. Everything depends on it and is downstream from it. Everything else is scaffolded on this revelation. Jesus told us, "Take up your cross each day and follow me," meaning that his cross and passion are inextricably woven into the life of his followers. The Paschal mystery, Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection, is the source and summit of Christian life. If you look at the Gospels themselves, they are passion narratives with long introductions. Pope Benedict XVI stated, "Don't be afraid of the cross. It's the source of every blessing." The wounded Christ, clearly depicted on the shroud, invites the faithful to claim his wounds, as well as their own, as a conduit of grace. They are precisely where his grace flows into us. Jesus, upon his death on the cross, descended into the world, filling it with light and hope. When light shines in darkness, the darkness is dispelled. So it is when Christ freely lays down his life and takes it back up. He's showing himself as being utterly of a higher order, Dr. Dalton pointed out. In truth, God has already definitively won the battle. The only question is, are we remaining in Christ? Christ, the head, is already seated in glory. If we're members of his body, if we remain with him, we are co-heirs. Regarding Jesus' death and resurrection, we have the documents. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and others. And we have monuments, namely, archaeological objects such as the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo, the latter being the cloth that covered Jesus' face while he was taken down from the cross. These objects are consistent with scriptural accounts of Jesus' passion and death. Not only are they compatible with the biblical narrative, but they're mutually illuminating. The artifact on one hand and the narrative on the other hand, both shedding light on each other. Every attempt to reproduce the shroud by any naturalistic means has failed. People can't do it in a lab, especially not at the micro level. Every detail, from the shape of the body and the ratios of one limb to the other, to the blood flows, to the folding of the thumbs from damage to the nerves in the hands, is captured with medical precision. In-depth studies of the shroud in the 1970s ruled out the presence of varnish, pigments, brush strokes, directionality, or any trace whatsoever of human artwork. Nor was the image produced by heat or by any type of photography, which wasn't invented until the 19th century. There are multiple hypotheses for how the shroud came into being, but none can be scientifically proven. That's where Christians need to step up and say, what if it was not created by naturalistic means? What if it's the natural result of a supernatural occurrence? The message of the Shroud of Turin is the same as that of the gospel narratives of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. God's unfathomable love. Jesus shows divine love in ways that we simply cannot doubt. It is in deed and in truth that he loves us. And when you look at the cross, when you're looking at his image in the shroud, you're seeing him say, "I love you." You must know this. Every detail in the biblical narratives of the Passion reveals some aspect of that love. It would be too easy to glance over the details of the Passion, but the shroud forces you to pause on it. The cross was the means by which Jesus, who had emptied himself of glory in becoming human, returned to his glorified state at the right hand of the Father. In order to follow Christ, people must take up their own crosses in the form of the trials they face each day. Jesus tells us, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So, can we expect any other pathway than the one he showed us? Learning about and venerating the shroud inevitably leads to a deeper understanding of the mission Jesus came to fulfill. Beholding and contemplating the image of Christ causes transformation to come within us. In that way, the shroud is just the doorbell. It says, "Come in." The shroud offers an astounding opportunity and a credible means of sharing the gospel with people who do not yet believe. Our faith is not about fairy tales or fables, but an event in history that actually took place. We celebrate the incarnation, that the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. From that place, he's reborn into glory. That's a picture of what we all must also do. We die with him in order to rise with him.